It is 8:21 here, Big 550 KTRS. Our agreement with the newspaper, our partnership with the Post, means that you can watch the TV show of the radio show at stltoday.com. Joining us now via Skype, which means you can listen to it as well as watch us, is John Favis. He is the author of a book called The Vatican Diaries. And, John, you joined us a year ago. This book came out, and it hit at a perfect time because Pope Francis was elected and became pope, and it sort of thrust your book onto the New York Times bestseller list. In the 1 year that Pope Francis has been the pope, I don't think anybody thought he was gonna make a splash, and the splash that he made over the last year. Thanks for joining us. And what are your initial thoughts on the first year of Pope Francis?
Yeah, I agree with you. He was a complete surprise. He was a surprise to most people when he came out on the balcony. And it seems that every day since then, he's been delivering one surprise after another. Uh, Not only in what he's said, and his words are very interesting, but in what he's actually done. He has undertaken a very ambitious program of reforming the Vatican's bureaucracy, which other popes had tried, but he's doing it in a much more aggressive way, bringing in outside consultants and naming a council of 8 cardinals who are going to push this thing through. He's indicated that he's willing to take a new look at some of the rules of the Catholic Church, not necessarily the doctrine or the teachings, but some of the rules that it puts into effect. For example, divorced and remarried Catholics who today cannot receive communion. The Pope has indicated this should be the subject of a discussion this fall when bishops come together. And so, I think for most people, he's been a breath of fresh air. I sometimes wonder if the cardinals who elected him knew what they were getting, because they certainly wanted someone who would reform the Vatican. I'm not sure they wanted someone who is going to kind of undertake to reform the Catholic Church's entire pastoral outlook.
Yeah, let's first start. We'll get to some of the inside the baseball in a second, but first let's talk public relations wise. I've heard so many non-Catholics this last year come up to me as a Catholic and say, "I love your Pope. I love what he's doing." Just in terms of public relations, it's almost been like a safety valve or a pressure valve has been opened, and the pressure has been relieved off of the Catholic Church because of him.
That's right. And I think there are two main reasons for that. Number one is the fact that Pope Francis is a bridge builder. Uh, we had two pontificates that were really focused on identity building for Catholics, John Paul II and Benedict. And the whole idea was, what do we believe? And kind of a corollary to that was, if you don't believe this, maybe you're not really a Catholic. And it was kind of the gatekeeper church. And now suddenly we have a pope who says we can't be so focused on this. We have to reach out to people who, are people of goodwill, but who may not know about our doctrine. We have to reach them in other ways. And so he's a bridge builder. The second thing is he speaks very simply. We had Pope Benedict, who was a very erudite theologian. We had Pope John Paul II, who also, he was a theologian and a philosopher, and his speeches were not so easy to digest. Pope Francis speaks in a very clear way. People get it. It's very direct kind of communication and unfiltered by the usual Vatican offices.
There's a famous picture, and I think it was early on in the first year that Pope Francis got down on his knees and kissed the feet of some troubled teens, some prisoners. There were a couple of people who had tattoos that he got down on his knees and kissed the feet. And there's a famous picture of him kissing the feet, and then 2 or 3 seats away, there's a girl who has her hand over her mouth like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm watching this great man get down on his knees." I mean, that's just extraordinary imagery.
It really is. And of course, previous popes, I can remember Pope Benedict, who would wash the feet of priests. And the idea was that, it's the clerical order that represents Christ's apostles at the Last Supper. And so we're reenacting this. And Pope Francis says, no, we've got to get the church out of the sacristy, out of the clerical sphere. We have to be where the people are. And he went to a prison for young people, on that first Holy Thursday. That was remarkable. And I think this is very typical of this Pope. He wants to get the church out of its usual routine, out of out of its own politics, out of its own theology, and into the lives of real men and women.
John Thavis, our guest via Skype here, stltoday.com, also at ktrs.com if you want to watch. His book is The Vatican Diaries. John, let's talk about inside the church. I've heard some Catholics high praise, but is there whispering from some of the more conservative and or traditional Catholics that aren't that happy with what he's doing?
Well, there is a little bit of pushback, but not very much. I mean, there's a new poll out today showing 80-some% of American Catholics are just fully supportive of the Pope. And I think that is typical of places around the world. I was just in Rome a couple of weeks ago, and I will say that the level of enthusiasm inside the Vatican is not quite as high. You know, Pope Francis certainly has a lot of support in the Vatican, but there are also a lot of people worried about what he's going to do. Is he going to dismantle the Roman Curia, which is the Vatican's bureaucratic machine? And I suppose some people are worried about losing their jobs as well. I think as a whole, though, the Catholic Church is really behind this Pope. I think he has a lot of momentum right now, and he needs to use that momentum to kind of push through the changes, because he needs the support, all the support he gets in order to make these changes.
Do you see the Catholics allowing divorced Catholics to receive communion, or gay marriage, or women finally being allowed to be priests, and or priests allowed to marry? Do you see any of those biggies falling in the next couple of years?
Right. Those are four very different questions, as you know. Divorced and remarried Catholics, yes, it's on the agenda for the Synod of Bishops in October. I think Pope Francis wants this policy to change. I think they will find a way to allow them to come back and receive communion. I mean, after all, these are Catholics who want to be active in the church. The Pope feels we have to find a way to make that happen. When it comes to questions like women priests, no, the Pope has said that's off the table. And I think he immediately wanted to make sure that people don't have the expectation that that will change. I do think he may be flexible on the issue of priestly celibacy. As you may know, the Catholic Church does have some married priests already.
Sure.
So it wouldn't be a revolutionary change. It would just be extending that in the Western Church. And I think the time is certainly right for a conversation on that. Other matters of church doctrine, as far as gay marriage goes, I don't think the Pope is going to come out for gay marriage. I think he's indicated he may, the church may be able to look at the state granting civil unions certain kinds of legal status, as long as they don't call it marriage. So there's probably a bit of a compromise that would happen there.
Some extraordinary conversations going on inside that Vatican. Our guest is John Thavis, and he wrote a great book called The Vatican Diaries. John, thank you very much for Skyping this morning. You were great. Have a good day.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. 8:30 here on the Big 550 KTR.